Two funds can track the same market, hold nearly the same securities, and still deliver very different results to investors. The difference may be hidden in structure, fees, spreads, taxes, tracking, or the price paid relative to net asset value. This lecture shows how to look past the label, mutual fund, ETF, or index fund, and discover what you are actually buying. Our focus is on mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, index funds, closed-end funds, and the practical process of fund analysis. Let's begin with the big idea. A pooled investment vehicle collects money from many investors and uses that money to buy a portfolio of securities or other assets. Instead of building a large portfolio alone, each investor owns shares in a professionally organized portfolio. This is powerful because it gives investors access to diversification, professional management, scale, convenience, specialized markets, and often a practical way to buy or sell fund shares. But there is always a trade-off. Funds charge fees. They may create tax consequences. They may follow benchmarks that don't match the investor's needs. They may expose investors to manager decisions, trading costs, liquidity limits, or hidden risks. So the first lesson is simple. Do not evaluate a fund only as a name or ticker symbol. Evaluate it as a portfolio solution. Ask what exposure it provides, how that exposure is implemented, what it costs, what risks it introduces, and whether it fits the investor's objective. That is the mindset we will use throughout this lecture. Now let's understand the basic structure of a fund. A fund owns a portfolio. Investors own shares or units of the fund. The value of each share is connected to the value of the portfolio after considering the fund's obligations. This brings us to net asset value, or NAV. NAV is the per-share value of the fund's underlying net assets. Conceptually, NAV tells us what each fund share represents, based on the value of the assets owned by the fund. But here is a very important point. NAV isn't always the same as the market price. For traditional open-end mutual funds, investors usually buy or redeem shares at the next calculated NAV, subject to any applicable fees. For ETFs and closed-end funds, shares trade in the market, so the market price can be slightly above or below NAV. Fund investors may earn returns in different ways. They may receive income distributions, such as dividends or interest. They may receive capital gains distributions when the fund sells securities at a gain. They may also benefit if the value of the fund share rises. So, as analysts, we must separate two ideas. NAV tells us the value of the underlying portfolio per share. Market price tells us what investors are willing to pay for that fund share in the market. When those two differ, that difference becomes part of the analysis. Let's move to mutual funds. A mutual fund pools money from many investors and invests in a portfolio of stocks, bonds, money market instruments, or other assets. In common usage, when we say mutual fund, we often mean an open-end fund. This means the fund can issue new shares when investors buy and redeem shares when investors sell back to the fund. Traditional mutual funds usually trade at the next calculated NAV after the market closes. This is different from an exchange-traded product that moves throughout the trading day. Mutual funds are often attractive because they are simple to use. They may support automatic contributions, dividend reinvestment, fractional share ownership, and convenient access through retirement plans or fund families. But mutual fund analysis must include costs. There may be an expense ratio, which is the ongoing cost of operating the fund. There may also be front-end loads, back-end loads, distribution fees, redemption fees, exchange fees, or account fees. A no-load fund means there is no sales load. It doesn't mean the fund has no expenses. This is a common misunderstanding. A mutual fund shouldn't be judged only by whether it is active, passive, loaded, no load, famous, or recently successful. The real questions are deeper. What is the fund trying to do? What does it actually own? What does it cost? Is the manager process credible? Is the benchmark appropriate? And does the fund improve the investor's total portfolio? Now, let's study exchange-traded funds, or ETFs. An ETF is also a pooled investment vehicle. Like a mutual fund, it owns a portfolio. But unlike a traditional mutual fund, ETF shares trade on an exchange during market hours. This gives ETFs an important feature: intraday trading. Investors can buy and sell ETF shares through the market, often in the same way they trade stocks. The trade happens at a market price, not necessarily exactly at NAV. Most of the time, for many liquid ETFs, the market price stays close to NAV. One reason is the creation and redemption mechanism. Authorized participants can create or redeem large blocks of ETF shares, and this process helps reduce large differences between market price and NAV. But helps doesn't mean guarantees. ETF investors still need to think about trading costs. These may include bid-ask spreads, brokerage commissions where applicable, market impact for large trades, and premiums or discounts relative to NAV. ETFs can be very useful for low-cost index exposure, tactical allocation, sector exposure, international exposure, fixed income exposure, or portfolio completion. But the lowest expense ratio doesn't automatically make an ETF the best choice. For ETFs, analysis must include both portfolio costs and trading costs. A fund can look cheap on paper, but become less attractive if it is hard to trade efficiently, poorly matched to the benchmark, or too narrow for the investor's actual objective. Next, let's examine closed-end funds. A closed-end fund raises capital by selling a fixed number of shares in an offering. After that, investors typically buy and sell shares in the secondary market, rather than redeeming shares directly with the fund. This structure creates a different analytical problem. Because the fund doesn't normally redeem shares every day, the manager may have a more stable capital base. This can be useful when the fund invests in less liquid assets or specialized strategies. However, closed-end fund shares trade at market prices, and those market prices can differ meaningfully from NAV. When the market price is above NAV, the fund trades at a premium. When the market price is below NAV, it trades at a discount. A discount doesn't automatically mean the fund is cheap. A premium doesn't automatically mean the fund is too expensive. The analyst must ask why the premium or discount exists. It may reflect fees, leverage, distribution policy, market sentiment, manager reputation, asset liquidity, or concerns about future performance. Some closed-end funds use leverage. Leverage can magnify gains, but it can also magnify losses and add financing risk. So closed-end fund analysis has two layers. First, evaluate the underlying portfolio and manager. Second, evaluate the market price relative to NAV, costs, leverage, liquidity, and distributions. The key comparison is this: mutual funds, ETFs, and closed-end funds are different structures. No structure is automatically best. The right choice depends on the investor's goal, account type, holding period, trading needs, tax situation, risk tolerance, and required exposure. Now, we need to separate fund structure from fund strategy. This is one of the most important ideas in the lecture. The words mutual fund, ETF, and closed-end fund describe structure. They tell us how investors access the vehicle and how shares are bought and sold. The words index, passive, and active describe strategy. They tell us how the portfolio is managed. An index fund is a mutual fund or ETF that seeks to track the performance of a specified market index. It may hold all the securities in the index or use a representative sample. Passive management is usually rules-based. It aims to provide exposure to a benchmark or market segment, rather than relying heavily on manager judgment to pick individual securities. Active management is different. An active manager selects securities or changes exposures with the goal of achieving the fund's objective. Often, that includes trying to outperform a benchmark or manage risk differently from the benchmark. These categories can combine. You can have an index mutual fund, an index ETF, an active mutual fund, or an active ETF. The active versus passive decision should be treated as a cost-benefit problem. Active management may add value if the manager produces enough risk-adjusted benefit after fees, trading costs, taxes, and implementation frictions. Passive management may add value by giving broad, transparent, low-cost exposure with low implementation risk. The question isn't simply which is better. The better question is which strategy solves the investor's portfolio problem more effectively after costs and risks. Let's now talk about fund objectives and investment styles. A fund's objective tells us what the fund is trying to accomplish. A fund style tells us the type of exposure the fund uses to pursue that objective. Common objectives include capital appreciation, current income, total return, capital preservation, benchmark tracking, and risk managed exposure. But objectives are only the beginning. Two funds may both say they seek total return, but one may hold mostly equities, while another may hold bonds, cash, and alternative strategies. The same objective can be pursued in very different ways. Investment styles give us more detail. A growth fund emphasizes companies expected to grow earnings, revenue, or cash flows faster than the market. A value fund emphasizes securities that appear inexpensive relative to fundamentals. An income fund focuses on dividends, interest, or other distributions. A sector fund concentrates in a specific industry or economic area. An international or global fund provides exposure outside the investor's home market or across both domestic and international markets. A balanced or allocation fund holds a mix of asset classes. But style labels can be dangerous when used too casually. The word income may sound conservative, but income can come from high-quality bonds, high-yield bonds, dividend stocks, real estate securities, option strategies, or leveraged funds. The risks aren't the same. So remember this principle. Labels are starting points, not conclusions. The analyst must look inside the portfolio to understand what the fund really owns. Now let's focus on costs. The expense ratio is the annual operating cost of a fund expressed as a percentage of assets. It usually includes management fees and other operating expenses. But the expense ratio isn't the full cost of ownership. Investors may also face sales loads, redemption fees, exchange fees, account fees, brokerage commissions, bid-ask spreads, market impact, taxes, and costs created by turnover inside the portfolio. Fees matter because they reduce returns over time. A higher cost fund can still be justified, but the reason must be explicit. Maybe the manager has unusual skill. Maybe the fund provides access to a difficult market. Maybe it offers better risk control or specialized exposure. But the burden of proof is higher. Fees are certain. Outperformance is uncertain. Now consider turnover. Turnover measures how actively a fund changes its holdings. High turnover may create more trading costs, more taxable events, and less style consistency. It can also reveal something about the manager's process. But low turnover isn't automatically good, and high turnover isn't automatically bad. Some strategies need trading to rebalance, manage risk, maintain duration, adjust factor exposure, or respond to new information. The question is whether the trading improves expected risk-adjusted performance after costs and taxes. So when you analyze fund costs, think broadly. Do not ask only, what is the expense ratio? Ask, what does the investor pay to buy, hold, and sell this fund? And are those costs justified by the role the fund plays? Next, let's discuss benchmarks, tracking, style boxes, and holdings analysis. A benchmark is a reference portfolio or index used to evaluate a fund. A good benchmark should match the fund's objective and opportunity set. This matters because a wrong benchmark can lead to a wrong conclusion. A fund may look weak simply because it is compared to an index with a different risk profile, or it may look strong because the benchmark is too easy. Benchmark fit should be evaluated before performance. For index funds, tracking is especially important. The fund should deliver benchmark exposure accurately, cheaply, and reliably. Tracking difference describes the return gap between the fund and the benchmark. Tracking error describes how variable that return gap is over time. The formulas can stay on screen, but the intuition is simple. One concept is about the gap, and the other is about how unstable that gap is. For active funds, tracking error can help show how different the fund is from the benchmark. Now let's connect this to style boxes. A style box is a visual summary of a fund's investment style. For equity funds, it often compares company size with valuation style. For bond funds, it may compare interest rate sensitivity with credit quality. Style boxes are useful, but incomplete. They don't fully describe concentration, sector exposure, country exposure, currency exposure, derivatives, leverage, liquidity, tax efficiency, or manager discretion. That is why holdings analysis is essential. A fund should be judged by what it owns, not by its name, marketing category, or recent return alone. Let's bring everything together with performance analysis and a practical comparison framework. Past performance is evidence, not proof. A fund's historical return should be evaluated relative to the correct benchmark, over meaningful horizons, and after considering risk, fees, taxes, and market conditions. A strong recent return doesn't automatically mean the fund is the best choice. It may simply reflect a style that was temporarily in favor. A modest return doesn't automatically mean the fund failed. It may have done exactly what it was designed to do if its benchmark or asset class also had modest returns. Risk-adjusted measures, such as the Sharpe ratio, can help summarize return relative to risk, but they shouldn't be used mechanically. Time period, asset class, volatility, and return patterns all matter. A disciplined fund comparison should follow a clear sequence. First, define the portfolio problem. Second, identify the fund objective and benchmark. Third, analyze the holdings. Fourth, evaluate all costs. Fifth, review performance relative to the correct benchmark. Sixth, evaluate implementation quality. Finally, decide whether the fund improves the overall portfolio. That last step is critical. A fund can be attractive by itself, but redundant or inappropriate in the investor's full portfolio. The final question is not, is this a good fund? The final question is this the right fund for this investor's objective, constraints, risks, and total portfolio? That is the essence of fund analysis. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this lecture helped you understand investment funds more clearly.